Everyone thinks their Saturday morning is safe. But mine shattered the moment 8 luxury SUVs rolled down my dirt road like a private army. It was supposed to be simple: coffee on the porch, Scout, my golden retriever, stretched out at my feet. The only question on my mind was pancakes or scrambled eggs. Then came the engines, a rumble that didn't belong in the quiet Wyoming air. Through the trees I saw them, vehicles gleaming, tires spitting up dust. And leading the parade, Abigail Gonzalez, our HOA president, clipboard raised like she was storming Normandy. She was dressed in her I'm important uniform, designer blazer, oversized sunglasses, lips pursed with authority. Behind her trailed 8 people, and they weren't evacuees. No, they were dressed like runway models who got lost on their way to brunch. Torn designer jeans, perfectly tousled hair, makeup that hadn't smudged a bit. Some even carried Starbucks cups, sipping iced lattes while eyeing my cabin like it was a 5-star resort. Scout growled low. He never growls without reason. "Vincent Watson," Abigail bellowed, using my full name like a judge sentencing me. "These families have been displaced by the water emergency. As HOA president, I declare your cabin an official shelter." The way she said it, you'd think she'd solved world hunger. But my Marine training kicked in immediately. Threat assessment. Nothing about these evacuees added up. Matching Louis Vuitton luggage, tags still dangling. Hair still holding professional styling, not a speck of dirt or mud on their pristine shoes. These weren't desperate families. These were Abigail's relatives, people I'd seen in community photos at pool parties and barbecues. I didn't even bother setting down my coffee. "Abigail, I hate to break up your theater production," I called, "but these aren't evacuees. They look like they're heading to brunch." The blonde in oversized shades, that was Jennifer, Abigail's cousin. The one with the mansion down the road and a fountain in her driveway bigger than my whole truck. The man in the distressed polo pretending to comfort an invisible child. Robert, her nephew, tech millionaire. I recognized them all. Abigail froze. For a heartbeat, her face crumbled in shock. Then rage, pure burning rage. "How dare you question official emergency procedures?" she shrieked, clipboard shaking in her grip. The sound echoed through the valley like a siren. Jennifer stepped forward, clutching her phone as if it were a script. "Sir, our children are cold and hungry. Please let us in." She gestured toward empty space where no children stood. Robert chimed in, "We've lost everything in the flood. Please have mercy." But even as he spoke, he checked his Rolex and sipped his $5 coffee. Scout's growl deepened, my stomach twisted. Because across the road, someone else was watching. Jack Rivera, my neighbor. Normally quiet, dependable, the kind of guy who waved when you passed by. But this time he was holding his phone steady, filming, not casually. Not like a neighbor amused by HOA drama. His angle was deliberate, his focus too precise. Evidence, but for who? I stayed calm, keeping tactical distance. "Nice try, Abigail. I've seen your family photos. I know who these people are." Her face flushed red. "Authority," she screamed, as though shouting the word hard enough could make it true. Her family faltered. Jennifer gave up the act, openly sipping champagne from a hidden bottle. Robert scrolled on his phone, clearly looking for a way out. The others shuffled, makeup cracking under the pressure. But Abigail, she doubled down. She stepped closer to my fence, her voice breaking from strain. "These families need shelter. If you refuse, their suffering is on your conscience." For the first time, I saw something flicker behind her fury. Pain, old pain, not just greed, not just obsession, something deeper. But the performance continued, and my unease grew, because the word they kept using again and again wasn't "let us in." It was "unlock." Unlock the cabin, unlock the door, unlock what's inside. They weren't after shelter, they were after something else, something locked away. And as Scout bristled at my feet, and Jack's phone lens glinted from across the street, one chilling thought seared through me. They knew something about my cabin I didn't. The next morning, Scout, barking jolted me awake before the sun had even burned the frost off the grass. I staggered to the window, still half asleep, but when I saw what was waiting outside, sleep vanished like smoke. Abigail was back. But this time she wasn't just waving her clipboard. She leveled up her theater production. She wore a reflective safety vest, a hard hat tucked under her arm, and a shiny badge hanging from her neck that looked freshly printed. And behind her, the same 8 family members from yesterday, but now they were dressed like emergency response volunteers, clipboards and tool belts dangling as if they'd been hired for a construction site. Robert strutted in a bright vest, barking fake instructions, while Jennifer had safety goggles perched on her head like a TV engineer. They paced along my fence, pretending to measure invisible hazards with plastic tools. It would have been hilarious if it hadn't been my property they were circling. "Vincent Watson," Abigail shouted, her voice thick with authority she hadn't earned. "We're here for your emergency shelter safety inspection. This is mandatory. Open the cabin." I rubbed my temples, staring through the glass. This wasn't just desperation anymore. This was obsession. "Those badges," I called down, stepping onto the porch, "look about as official as a $3 bill. What's next, Abigail? You gonna tell me you're the Secretary of Defense?" Her face hardened. She pulled out a laminated sheet, waving it like it was sacred scripture. "This is an official county emergency declaration, signed by the emergency coordinator. Your cabin is designated community shelter space. Compliance is mandatory." I didn't even need to squint. I knew a forgery when I saw one. The letterhead looked like clip art. The signature, pixelated and laminated. Who laminates emergency documents? "Funny," I said, raising my phone where she could see it recording, "because I spoke with Patricia at County Services this morning. She's been there 15 years. She's never heard of any coordinator, never heard of an emergency declaration, never heard of you." For the second time, I watched Abigail's mask crack. Her lips trembled, her hands shook, but instead of backing down, she leaned harder into the lie. "It's urgent," she screamed, voice cracking under the strain. "Every minute you delay puts lives at risk." Her volunteers joined in, each playing their part like desperate actors in a school play. Jennifer clutched her chest dramatically. "My grandmother needs her medication. It's too cold out here." Never mind, it was 75 degrees. Robert held up his phone, playing a sound effect of a crying baby. "Our child can't sleep outdoors another night." Another cousin, wrapped in a fur coat worth more than my cabin's roof, begged, "Please, just unlock the door. Let us warm up." That word again. Unlock, not open, not let us in, unlock. Scout growled low at my side, hackles up. And then I saw him. Jack. My quiet neighbor, my supposed friend, standing across the street. Same spot as yesterday, same phone in hand, filming, always filming. Not casual, not curious, calculated, evidence gathering. But evidence for who? Something in my gut turned cold. This wasn't random harassment. This was coordinated. Abigail's family didn't just want inside. They wanted access to something specific, something locked. I stepped closer to the fence, keeping my voice level. "Abigail, I called the county. There's no emergency, no coordinator, no inspection. What you're doing right now, it's harassment, and it ends here." For a split second, I expected her to collapse under the truth, to see her shoulders sag, her family scatter. But instead, her eyes lit up. Like my refusal was the very thing she'd been waiting for. "Performance," she shrieked, tears springing hot into her eyes. "You think this is a performance?" Her voice cracked, breaking into something raw, almost human. "These families have real needs, you heartless." She didn't finish. Because her family suddenly shifted. Like dancers hitting their mark, they spread out, circling my cabin. Not violently, not random, methodical. They tapped windows, pressed along walls, paced the perimeter with eerie precision. Not actors anymore, surveyors searching. Jennifer's voice rang through the air. "Just unlock the door for 5 minutes. We only need 5 minutes." And then through the chaos, I heard a whisper, so faint I thought I imagined it. "Vincent." I turned, it was Jack. Phone lowered, face pale. "She's not just after your cabin," he whispered. His voice trembled. "There's something buried underneath from 30 years ago." Before I could demand answers, headlights swept across the yard. Vehicles rolled in. Jack slipped into the shadows, gone like smoke. And I was left standing on the porch, Scout growling at my side, my heart pounding with one terrifying question. What secret could be buried beneath my cabin that Abigail Gonzalez was willing to destroy everything to find? The Wyoming night has a way of swallowing sound. But that evening, as I stood under the old oak tree at 11 p.m., every cricket chirp and rustle of leaves felt like a warning. I shouldn't have been there, but Jack told me to come, and something in his voice when he whispered about what lay beneath my cabin, it hooked me deep. Scout stayed behind. This was no place for him. My hands were cold, my heart beat faster than I wanted to admit. Then Jack appeared, moving out of the shadows like he'd done this before. The moon caught his face, and I swear I'd never seen a man look that scared. Not nervous, scared. Bone-deep, life-or-death fear. "Vincent," he said, his voice low, his eyes darting around like Abigail herself might spring out of the trees. "What I'm about to tell you, you won't believe it." He pulled a manila envelope from under his jacket. Thick, heavy, documents spilling out like a confession, black and white photos of my cabin, but not the cabin I knew. A younger version, 1990s, construction equipment parked around it, a foundation half exposed. My stomach dropped. "In 1993, Jack whispered, the guy who owned your cabin buried something beneath the foundation, something valuable. Nobody knows if it's cash, gold, or documents, but Abigail's father, he knew. He spent years trying to get it." I stared at the pictures. Excavators, piles of dirt, a half-filled pit. And in the corner of one photo, something metallic glinting before the earth swallowed it. "You're telling me," I said slowly, "that all this, the fake evacuees, the badges, the emergency declarations, it's just a cover to dig under my cabin?" Jack nodded grimly. "She needs access from inside. That's why she keeps pushing you to unlock it. Outside, digging would draw attention. Inside, she can excavate in secret." He pulled more papers, handwritten letters, notes scribbled in Abigail's unmistakable handwriting. Each one assigning roles, Jennifer as the desperate mother, Robert as the grieving father, scripts, coaching, every move rehearsed. I felt my skin crawl. This wasn't chaos, it was premeditation. And then Jack handed me something that made my chest tighten. Printed texts, dozens of them, conversations between him and Abigail, reports on me, when I left for work, when I had visitors, when my cabin was empty. I felt sick. "So everything?" I asked, voice hollow. "The neighborly waves, the small talk at the fence, it was all surveillance." Jack's face crumpled. "It started that way. Abigail told me you stolen what was rightfully our family's. She convinced me to move here to watch you, but after a while," his voice broke. "After a while, I realized she was lying. You're not the thief, she is." The betrayal cut deep, even if part of me had already suspected. He pulled out one final document, a purchase agreement, Abigail's name on it, my cabin listed, but the price, half of what it was worth. "She thinks once she proves something, buried, you'll be buried in legal trouble. She'll offer you this deal, force you to sell cheap." The rage in my chest was sharp. Abigail wasn't just after treasure, she was after my entire life. My home, my peace. And then Jack's eyes flicked to the trees. His voice dropped lower. "She's already moving tonight." Through the branches, I saw them. Shadows. Figures with flashlights, metal detectors, ground-penetrating equipment, moving in formation around my cabin. Adrenaline surged. "Jack," I hissed, "we need to document this. If this goes to court, it can't be my word against hers. We need evidence." He nodded, already pulling a camera from his bag, snapping photos with a telephoto lens. "I've been building a case file," he admitted, "ever since I realized what she was planning." And then he handed me one more paper, thin, innocent-looking, but it stopped me cold. A lawyer's letter, discussing adverse possession claims through documented community use attempts. In plain English, Abigail had been building a legal case to steal my cabin, every fake emergency, every staged inspection, every shelter request. It was all part of creating a paper trail, evidence that the community had tried to use my cabin, evidence that I had unreasonably denied them. She wasn't just chasing treasure, she was trying to steal the land itself. I clenched the letter in my fist, eyes fixed on the flashlights dancing around my foundation. "She's already escalated," I whispered. "She's already crossed the line. Tomorrow I'm confronting her, no more games." Jack looked at me, torn between guilt and fear. "Are you sure? If she knows you figured out her plan, she won't just give up. She might get dangerous." I stared through the trees, watching Abigail's army of shadows circle my cabin like vultures. "She already is." And in that moment, I knew tomorrow wouldn't just be another standoff with a clipboard. Tomorrow, I'd be staring down a woman who turned obsession into a weapon. And the only question was, what would she do when I finally fought back? Sunday morning hit me like a hangover, except I hadn't touched a drop of alcohol. Scout barking rattled the cabin at 6:30 sharp. When I dragged myself to the window, the sight outside made my stomach clench. Abigail was back. And this time she came dressed for war. She wore what looked like a county emergency uniform, reflective vest, utility belt, an oversized folder tucked under her arm. Behind her, the same 8 relatives lined up like toy soldiers, but now they had shiny volunteer badges clipped to their chests and props from a costume shop clearance bin. One cousin clutched a tape measure, stretching it pointlessly across the grass. Robert wore a hard hat tilted like he thought he was running a construction crew. Jennifer, the day before spotted sipping champagne, now wore oversized safety goggles. They were playing dress-up with my home as the stage. "Vincent Watson," Abigail bellowed, voice cutting through the morning air. "We're here to conduct a mandatory inspection of your emergency shelter violation. Compliance is required." Scout bristled at my side, teeth bared. I stepped onto the porch, coffee mug in hand. My patience had worn thin. "Those badges are faker than Monopoly money," I called down. "What's next? You gonna appoint yourself Secretary of Homeland Security?" She didn't blink. She pulled out her ace. A laminated document, waved it high like it was the Constitution itself. "This is an official county emergency declaration signed by the emergency coordinator," she shouted. "Your cabin is designated as a community shelter. Denial of access puts lives at risk." I almost laughed. The letterhead looked like it was printed on a home office inkjet. The signature pixelated from being pasted in, and laminated. Since when does the government laminate urgent orders? "Nice try," I said, holding up my phone so she could see me recording. "I spoke to Patricia at County Services. She's worked there 15 years. She's never heard of any coordinator, never heard of any declaration, and definitely never heard of you." For a heartbeat, Abigail froze. Her lips trembled, her eyes watered. But then, like someone lighting a fuse, she erupted. "Because it's urgent," she screamed, her voice breaking. "Every second you delay puts lives in danger." Her family lunged into their roles. Jennifer clutched her chest, gasping. "My grandmother needs her medication in a warm cabin." Robert lifted his phone, the sound of a crying baby blasting from his speaker. "Our child can't sleep outdoors another night." Another cousin shivered dramatically while wearing a fur coat worth more than my roof. It would have been comical if not for one detail. They all used the same word, over and over: unlock. Not open, not let us in, unlock. It wasn't about shelter, it was about something locked inside. Then came the shift. Abigail's crew spread out, circling my cabin like a pack of wolves, not smashing windows, not vandalizing, testing, knocking softly, peering into cracks, tapping wood like surveyors checking for weak spots. Jennifer leaned close to a window. "Just 5 minutes, that's all we need." And then over the chaos, a whisper cut through. "Vincent." I turned Jack. Standing across the road again, phone still in hand, but this time his face pale, his eyes desperate. "She's not just after your cabin," he hissed. "There's something buried underneath, from 30 years ago." My blood iced. "Jack, what are you talking about?" I started. But before he could answer, headlights swept the yard. Engines growled. Abigail's family snapped back into their formation as if nothing had happened. And Jack, just like the night before, melted into the shadows, gone. I stood frozen on the porch, Scout snarling at my side, Abigail's crew packing like vultures. And the word echoed in my mind like a curse. Unlock. They knew. They knew something about my cabin that I didn't. And whatever it was worth more to Abigail Gonzalez than her dignity, her reputation, maybe even her sanity. The wind cut sharp that night as I stood under the oak tree, flashlight clutched in one hand, the other resting on Scout's collar to keep him calm. But when Jack stepped from the shadows, I realized it wasn't the cold making me shiver. His face, pale, drawn, like a man carrying something too heavy for one person. "Vincent," he whispered, eyes darting toward the road as if Abigail herself might leap out. "You need to hear this. You deserve the truth." He handed me a manila envelope, thick with photographs and papers. My hands trembled as I flipped through them. Black and white shots of my cabin, but not the cabin I knew. These were from the early 1990s. The ground torn open, foundation exposed, heavy equipment parked around what looked like a half-filled pit. "What am I looking at?" I asked, though dread already pressed against my ribs. Jack swallowed hard. "The man who owned your cabin before you, William Hartford. In 1993, he buried something under the foundation, Nobody knows what exactly. Rumor says cash, maybe gold, maybe documents, but Abigail's father, he knew. He spent decades trying to get this property. I stared at the photos, at the glint of metal half buried before the earth swallowed it. Jack pulled out letters next, handwritten, Abigail's family members trading notes like actors preparing for a play. Jennifer, I'll play the desperate mother, but coach me, what do real evacuees look like? Robert, I'll bring props, maybe equipment from my buddy's security company. Just make sure our stories line up. My skin prickled. It wasn't chaos, it wasn't hysteria. This was rehearsed, planned down to the last fake sob. And then Jack handed me something that made my pulse thunder in my ears. Printed text messages, dozens of them between him and Abigail. Updates, reports, my routine spelled out in cold detail. He left at 8:30 this morning. No visitors this week. Cabin empty until Sunday. I felt like the ground had been ripped out from under me. So, I said, voice tight, the neighborly waves, the help with yard work, all of it was surveillance. Jack's face twisted with shame. At first, Abigail convinced me you stolen from us. She said the cabin held something that belonged to our family. She begged me to watch you. But after a while, he looked at me, eyes glistening. After a while, I knew she was lying. You weren't the thief, she was. The betrayal stung, even with his confession. And then Jack pulled out the final page. A purchase agreement, Abigail's name at the top. My cabin listed, but the price, barely half its worth. She thinks once she proves something, buried, you'll drown in legal trouble, you'll be desperate, and she'll swoop in with this deal, force you to sell cheap. My grip tightened on the paper. Abigail wasn't chasing treasure. She was trying to strip me of everything, my cabin, my land, my peace. But Jack wasn't finished. There's more, he said, lowering his voice. He handed me a legal letter from a lawyer 6 months ago. My stomach dropped as I read. Adverse possession, claims through documented community use attempts. It clicked, the fake emergencies, the staged inspections, the endless demands. She wasn't just playing theater, she was building a legal trail. A case that said the community had tried to use my cabin, and that I had denied them. She wanted to claim my land by law. I crushed the letter in my fist, rage searing through me. Abigail wasn't just dangerous, she was methodical. She was patient. She was prepared to burn down her own reputation if it meant stealing mine. Jack's voice broke the silence. She's already escalated, look. He pointed toward my cabin. Through the trees, I saw flashlights cutting the dark, shadows moving in formation, metal detectors sweeping the ground, long poles with sensors pressed against the soil. Not actors now, not family pretending to be evacuees. This was a full survey, a search. Jack, I hissed, we need evidence. If this goes to court, it can't just be my word against hers. He was already raising a camera with a telephoto lens, snapping shots. I've been building my own file ever since I realized what she was doing. We crouched in the dark, watching Abigail's crew circle my home like grave robbers. The faint hum of equipment, the glint of polished shoes on damp grass, the urgency in their whispers, it made my skin crawl. And then Jack handed me one last document. Vincent, he said softly, this is what broke me. It was a purchase agreement. Abigail's family already had it drawn up. They weren't just hopping, they were certain. Certain they'd break me, certain I'd give in, certain I'd sell. I stared at the page, my name already typed in. My home priced like a bargain shelf item. That was the moment something inside me hardened. No more, I said, voice cold. Tomorrow when she shows up, I'm confronting her with all of this, the photos, the letters, the recordings, everything. Jack hesitated. If you corner her, she might break. I looked back at the flashlights, circling my cabin like wolves around a wounded animal. She already has. Monday morning didn't greet me with birdsong. It greeted me with devastation. I stepped outside in my boots and pajamas, coffee mug trembling in my hand. My yard looked like a war zone. The earth around my cabin was torn apart, deep holes gouged into the foundation's edge, my fence ripped down in 3 places, landscaping shredded like a storm had chewed it raw. And scattered across the chaos, champagne bottles, designer heels, a fur coat tangled on the fence. Scout ran from hole to hole, barking, sniffing, whining like he couldn't make sense of what these intruders had done to our home. They hadn't just trespassed, they'd dug, they'd searched. They violated every inch of my land like it belonged to them. And then I heard the engines. Abigail's convoy, again. She stepped out of her SUV, and the sight of her made me catch my breath. Her pristine image was gone. Her once perfect hair stood wild, matted with dirt. Her expensive outfit was ruined, streaked with mud. Her manicured hands were raw and blistered. She looked like she'd spent the night clawing at the earth itself. "Vincent," she cried, staggering forward. Her voice didn't carry the fake authority anymore. It carried desperation, hysteria. "I know you're hiding something. 30 years of planning can't be for nothing." In her hands, she clutched a shovel like it was Excalibur. Her knuckles white around the handle, her arms trembling with some terrible mix of rage and grief. Behind her, her family stumbled from their vehicles. Jennifer's once luxurious fur coat hung in rags, caked with mud. Robert's designer jeans were ripped and filthy. Their faces were pale, hollow, as if the obsession had drained them of more than sleep. "You and your family destroyed my property looking for a fairy tale," I said, my voice steady despite the storm inside me. "You trespassed, you vandalized, you're facing real consequences now." Abigail laughed, and it wasn't the laugh of someone amused. It was jagged, broken, the kind that makes your stomach twist. "Fairy tale?" she shrieked, brandishing the shovel. "My father spent decades researching this land. He told me exactly where to dig. He died for this. And now you think you can deny me, deny us." Her face contorted. Rage and grief fused together, blinding her to everything but the obsession burning in her chest. Then she snapped. With a scream, she swung the shovel not at me but at the cabin. Metal slammed into wood, splintering the siding. She struck again, and again, each blow punctuated with a cry that was part fury, part mourning. "Unlock this cabin," she roared. "I'll tear it down myself if I have to." The sound of shovel against wood rang through the valley like gunshots. My chest tightened as I watched thousands of dollars of restoration splinter under her hands. Behind her, her family hesitated. They shifted uncomfortably, eyes darting between me and Abigail. For the first time, doubt flickered in their faces. Watching their matriarch unravel was more than they'd signed up for. "That's enough," I shouted, pulling my phone from my pocket. "This ends now. I'm calling the sheriff." But before I could dial, a new voice cut through the chaos. "Aunt Abigail, stop." The word hit me like a hammer. "Aunt." I spun. "Jack." He stood near the vehicles, face pale, eyes heavy with conflict. And in that instant, everything I thought I knew about him shattered. "You're her nephew," I said, the betrayal sharp as a blade. Jack winced. "Vincent, it's not what you think." But Abigail turned on him like a predator. Her eyes narrowed, shovel raised like a weapon. "You worthless traitor," she screamed. "I offered you 10%, and you side with him." The air went razor thin. Jack froze, torn between loyalty and conscience, watching his aunt unravel into madness before our eyes. Her family stepped back, unwilling to stop her, unwilling to help. Only Jack stood there, trembling, staring at the woman who had dragged him into this nightmare. "Jack," I said, voice low, steady, trying to pierce the chaos. "Are you with her or with me?" The question hung heavy, the kind that could split a man in two. Abigail swung the shovel again, gouging the cabin wall, splinters flying. "You're all against me," she howled, tears streaming down her mud-streaked face. 40 years I've waited, 40 years, and now my own family betrays me." The sound of sirens wailed in the distance, growing louder, closer. Jack pulled his phone from his pocket, hands shaking, but steady enough to press one number. "I'm with the truth," he said quietly, "and this has gone too far." The look on Abigail's face, when she realized her own blood had chosen to stop her, wasn't just rage, it was heartbreak. And as she dropped to her knees in the mud, clutching the shovel like a lifeline, she screamed one last haunting promise. "Check your basement, Vincent Watson. The real treasure is under the floorboards." Even in defeat, even as deputies pulled into my drive, Abigail's eyes burned with certainty. And against my will, one thought coiled in my gut, chilling me to the bone. What if she was right? 3 days after Abigail's arrest, I stood at the top of my basement stairs, flashlight in one hand, phone in the other. I'd lived in that cabin for 3 years and never once thought to explore the basement. It was unfinished. Concrete walls, exposed beams, nothing more than storage. But Abigail's words echoed in my head like a curse. The real treasure is under the floorboards. Scout whined at the doorway, tail low, ears flat. He didn't want me going down there. Truth be told, neither did I. The wooden steps creaked as I descended, each groan echoing off the concrete like a warning. The air was damp, musty, heavy with 30 years of silence. And then I saw it. Built into the far wall of the foundation was a safe, not a cheap lockbox. A massive, commercial-grade safe, the kind you'd expect in a bank vault, not a Wyoming cabin. My pulse hammered. This wasn't something someone tucked into a corner. This safe had been built into the foundation. The cabin wasn't just constructed around it, it was constructed because of it. I swept my flashlight across the shelves nearby. Dozens of dusty folders, document boxes labeled with dates from the 1990s. My hands shook as I pulled one down, flipping it open. Surveyor reports, legal correspondence, water rights documentation. The pieces clicked fast and hard. The previous owner, William Hartford, had been in a land dispute. These papers showed he held exclusive water access rights to the lake. Rights worth millions to any developer. Developers had begged, threatened, harassed him. And Hartford, he refused. I pulled another box. Inside was a journal, handwritten, Hartford's voice reaching through decades of dust. They won't stop. They send men to survey without permission. They make offers, threats, but I won't sell. I'll protect this land until I'm gone. My chest tightened as I flipped to the final entry, written just 2 months before his death. If something happens to me, the truth about the water rights is safe. The combination is my daughter's birthday, the daughter they never knew I had. I froze, staring at those words. A daughter, a secret heir, and a safe holding secrets powerful enough to stop entire corporations. The treasure Abigail's family had hunted for decades wasn't gold. It was evidence. Evidence of illegal tactics, harassment, maybe crimes buried with Hartford himself. I forced my shaking hands to the lock. My mind ran through the dates I'd seen in the documents, piecing together the only birthday Hartford might have left behind. When the final dial clicked, the heavy door creaked open. Inside, stacks of papers meticulously preserved. Land grants from the 1800s, tribal correspondence, maps, deeds. And one letter. My breath caught as I read the shaky handwriting. When I traced the history of this land, I found something bigger than water rights. This land was never legally transferred from the tribal owners. All of it. The lake, the properties, every cabin built here. If anyone ever learns the truth, ownership could be challenged. Entire communities could change hands, so I locked it away. Because men like Gonzalez will bury this truth forever if they find it. My flashlight trembled in my grip. The implications hit like a sledgehammer. Abigail hadn't been chasing fairy tales. She'd been chasing a ghost of her father's obsession. And she was right about one thing. There was something under my cabin, something so big it could rewrite ownership of the entire lake. I was still reeling when my phone rang. Jack's name lit the screen. "Vincent," he said the moment I answered, his voice urgent, ragged. "She made bail this morning. Abigail's already telling people you're hiding millions in treasure. She's talking about getting a court order to search your property." My chest went cold. How could she know about the safe, about any of this? Jack hesitated. Her father told her, or maybe she pieced it together from old records, but Vincent, you need to understand. If she gets that warrant, those documents are gone, buried again, lost forever. I glanced back at the open safe. At the journals, the land grants, the fragile truth waiting in the dark. "You're right," I said quietly, "but this isn't just about me anymore." Jack arrived an hour later, exhausted, carrying a laptop bag stuffed with his own evidence. He set it on my kitchen table, pulling up recordings of Abigail, her voice growing more unhinged with every clip. From family legacy to ancestral justice to wild rants about destiny. I told him about the safe, about Hartford's journals, about the tribal land rights, his face drained of color. "Vincent," he whispered, "if that's true, then none of us, not me, not you, not Abigail, legally own this land. The tribal council does." Before I could respond, headlights swept across the cabin walls. Engines rumbled, Abigail again, but this time she wasn't alone. Through the window, I saw her marching toward my porch with a team of lawyers and men carrying surveying equipment. Her hair still wild, her clothes still stained, but her eyes burned with something worse than fury. "Conviction." "Vincent Watson," her voice rang out, cutting through the night. We have a court order for a boundary survey and limited excavation rights. You can cooperate, or you can be held in contempt. Jack's hand clenched around his phone. She's escalating. She knows you found something. I stared at the safe, the documents, the truth heavy in my hands. Abigail's voice raged outside, the thud of boots stomping closer. And in that moment, I realized the nightmare had outgrown me. This wasn't just Abigail's obsession. This was history itself, clawing its way to the surface. And the next decision I made could change the fate of everyone on that lake. The knock on my door wasn't a request, it was a demand. "Mr. Watson," a voice boomed, sharp and official. "This is County Surveyor Johnson. We have a court order for a boundary survey including limited excavation rights. Open the door immediately, or we'll proceed without you." Through the window, I saw Abigail, mud-stained and wild-eyed, standing beside a sharp-suited lawyer with a briefcase that looked more expensive than my truck. Behind them, men unloaded tripods and surveying equipment, their boots crunching on my gravel drive. She wasn't pretending anymore. No evacuees, no badges, no costumes. This time, she dragged the law to my doorstep. Jack hovered at my side, face pale but determined. "She's been planning this for months," he whispered. "The harassment, the trespassing, it was all part of a legal strategy. She was documenting community use attempts. She's trying to force ownership through adverse possession." I looked at him, then at the open safe behind us, its documents spread across my table. Tribal land deeds, Hartford's journals, proof that this entire area might never have been legally sold. This wasn't just about me anymore. It was about the truth. "Jack," I said, my voice steady even as my stomach twisted, "call the tribal council, now." Minutes later, a black SUV pulled up behind Abigail's convoy. An elderly woman stepped out, her long braid catching the wind, her eyes sharp and steady as a hawk's. Ellie Crow Feather, representative of the local tribal council. Abigail's lawyer bristled. "This is a private property matter," he snapped. Ellie didn't flinch, not if the property was never yours to begin with. The words hung heavy, cutting through the morning air sharper than any legal threat. Abigail's face twisted. "Don't listen to her," she shrieked. "This land belonged to my father's family for generations. The treasure beneath it is ours." But Jack stepped forward, pulling out his phone. "Not treasure," he said firmly. "Evidence. I have recordings of you admitting this entire campaign was staged. Fake evacuees, fake emergencies, all to create a paper trail." He hit play, and Abigail's voice spilled into the air, ranting about roles, about strategy, about maps her father had drawn. Her lawyer's confident smile faltered. I turned to Ellie, placing Hartford's journal in her hands. "These documents belong with you," I said quietly. "Not me, not her, with the people this land was stolen from." For a moment silence fell. Only Scout's low growl broke it. Then Ellie nodded, her voice carrying the weight of generations. "This land holds more than money. It holds memory, and it will be protected." Abigail's scream split the stillness. She lunged forward, grabbing the shovel she'd left by her SUV, but deputies closed in fast. Her family didn't follow her this time. They stepped back, faces pale, the weight of her madness finally too much to carry. 40 years, she howled as the cuffs clicked shut around her wrists. 40 years my father searched, and now you'll all see, the real treasure is still down there. She fought, kicking against the deputies, her cries echoing through the valley. But her family turned away, one by one, climbing back into their vehicles in silence. When the dust settled, I was left standing with Ellie and Jack, the safe yawning open behind us, its secrets spilling into the light for the first time in decades. The days that followed blurred. Lawyers came, officials came, the media came, but Ellie's people came too, quiet, resolute, with the patience of those who have seen centuries of injustice. The second safe was opened under their supervision. Inside weren't gold bars or diamonds, but sacred artifacts. Ceremonial items, documents, pieces of history that belonged not to me, not to Abigail, but to them. Together, we forged a stewardship agreement. The cabin remained my home, but the land around it became part of a cultural preserve, protected by tribal and state law. The lake would no longer be a playground for developers. It would be a place of memory and respect. 6 months later, I sat on my porch with Scout, watching as Ellie led a blessing ceremony by the water. Drums echoed across the lake, voices rose in song, and for the first time in years, the land felt at peace. Jack stood beside me, no longer the spy eye, once cursed, but the liaison between our community and the tribal council. His betrayal had cut deep, but his redemption was real. He chose truth over blood, and that mattered. As for Abigail, she served her sentence quietly, released into a life far smaller than the empire she dreamed of building. But sometimes, late at night, Scout would prick his ears, and I'd hear the faint hum of a car creeping past on the distant road. She never stopped watching, never stopped circling. Some obsessions don't die, they linger like ghosts. And yet, sitting on that porch, I realized something Hartford had understood long before me. Sometimes the greatest treasure isn't gold, or land, or power. It's the truth, and the courage to protect it, no matter who tries to bury it. You've heard this confession, now wait until you hear the next one, the truth that shatters everything you thought you knew.